as Jacqueline stated, I've been here on the genealogy staff since July of 1999. And all those years, I've reviewed or checked thousands of new member applications and supplemental applications. And it's one thing that I've noticed over the years is that I'm oftentimes struck by how seldom people submit land records as part of their documentation. And I sometimes wonder, do they realize the potential for what the information lies within those records? I realize that the published abstracts, which are the many of our introduction to those types of records. I remember when I first started looking at those, and they are very dry reading. They don't make the most interesting reading, and you kind of see, John Jones has 50 acres on Perch Creek and lives next to Edward Thompson. So what does it mean? Well, the more and more you get into it and you begin to look at the records, you realize that maybe there's a lot more to it. And I think part of it, too, is just getting over the legalese that you find in deeds. They have their own jargon. Grantor, grantee, heirs and assigns, the different types of deeds, warranty deeds, deeds of trust, deeds of gift, quitclaims, bounty land warrants. And so once you begin to familiarize yourself with all the different types of deeds and what they mean, what the interpretation by the different type of deed and so forth, I think then as you become more comfortable with the different types of deeds and with the jargon that is found specifically in the land records, I think then you start to settle in and become much more comfortable with the land records and the whole record process and just looking at these, and then begin to go through and pull out the really important stuff that can be found in these records. The one thing too, I think that sometimes, today we are inundated in a world of online research, and in the world of where we have all these online databases, births and deaths of such and such. I think we oftentimes are looking for instant gratification. We're looking for these databases that are immediately going to give us the mother and the father, and the place of birth and the place of death, and all that good stuff, all the vital information. Well, that's the one thing about deed research. Deed research, more often than not, takes time. And so it's a kind of thing that you may find one deed that may perhaps leads to another deed, that leads to another deed, but you're probably not going to find it all in one day. And it certainly is not going to be, you're not going to go back 3 or 4 generations within 5 minutes if perhaps that's what you're hoping to find by going to a particular website. So I think that perhaps is one of the reasons why people may be reluctant also to really delve into these types of records. But I will say from personal experience that once I did start getting into the land records, I loved them. And without a doubt, they are one of my favorite types of genealogical record types now. And I have found some incredible information in them, information that could not have been found anywhere else, and definitely help me bring down brick walls. So I hope that you enjoyed this morning's presentation. I hope that perhaps I will, if nothing else, be able to either inspire your curiosity or perhaps even give you some ideas on how to approach doing your own research, or if you're maybe have interest in joining the society, or you are already a member and you're trying to submit a supplemental, maybe give you ideas on the type of information that you can look for going forward. So, using land records in genealogical research, an underutilized resource. Why use land records? Well, first of all, prior to Bible records began to be issued in most states, deeds oftentimes provided the only clues to family relationships, wives and their maiden names, middle names, and the names of the children. Now, if you're, for instance, if you have a lot of New England ancestors, you kind of luck out in that the town records began recording a lot of the Bible records at a very early phase. So you can find a lot of the children's names recorded in the town records. But especially if you're in the South, it's a whole other story, and about the only way that you're going to be able to start proving a lot of these associations and family relationships is you need to look at the land. Useful in demonstrating the existence of more than one individual with the same name within the same county. Look for things such as suffixes, junior, senior, the elder. If you find a deed that says someone so-and-so junior, that probably means there was an older man with the same name. It may not be daddy, might be an uncle, might be someone who has no relationship to this individual at all. It's just someone who is an elder to that particular individual. Another very important thing to watch for in helping to differentiate individuals with the same name within the same county is look for watercourses. Because oftentimes, if you pay very close attention to the watercourses, certain families or certain individuals will show up along certain creeks, certain rivers, and their land holdings will all mention a particular creek or a particular river. But then if you begin to see a lot of other deeds for someone else, and they're all on another watercourse, you may be then realizing that you in fact have two families that are separated and they're living on different watercourses. Sometimes you even will see this type of thing reflected in the tax records, where it'll give a name and then in parentheses it'll give the name of the watercourse on which that particular individual lives. So those are just a little bit of a few clues to try to keep in mind. Document names of heirs identified in will simply as my other children. I don't know about you, but that's always kind of a bummer when you want to tear your hair out. When you see that kind of thing, you know. And for instance, I have a good example of my own research. My great-great-great-grandfather, a man by the name of Reuben Crosley, died in Vigo County in Indiana in 1837. His will was made out in 1837, and in his will he names my wife Lois, my youngest daughter Elizabeth, and the children of my daughter Rhoda. And then he goes on to say, and to my other children I leave my real property following the decease of my widow. So who are these other children? Well, I knew that he owned a fair amount of land in Vigo County. So I began to go and look at the deeds. He had purchased a number of tracts of land through the General Land Office. And you began to find a number of quitclaim deeds where the children are releasing their claims to the land that was originally purchased by Reuben Crosley. And there was even a beautiful deed in 1852 where it was a series of 7 grantors, or people who are selling the land. And in this deed, it very explicitly states, we the grantors, as named in the last will and testament of Reuben Crosley, deceased. And then it names 7 individuals, three married couples, all of whom the women were all Crosleys. If you go back to the Claremont County, Ohio marriage records, they're all Crosleys. And the last individual, Josiah Crosley, my great-great-grandfather. But the thing is none of those individuals are actually named in Reuben Crosley's will by name. Those are all my other children named in the will. But But you have to go to the deeds to find out who those other children are. Document family migrations from one location to another. This is a very important thing because, you know, you may find one family or one particular individual in one county, but how do you know for sure that he's the individual that came from this county over here? He may very well be. Well, if you have, in many instances, I'll demonstrate in my case study today, you'll see some very good examples of where it says so-and-so now with such and such a county, and they're selling land in the county where they previously lived. Considerations when using land records. Transfer of personal properties is recorded in the same deed books as land transactions. A personal property can include things such as slaves, and especially if you're in the South, and you will see some examples of that today, where personal property was conveyed, and you find those same types of deeds located in the same deed books as your land transactions. Cases involving land oftentimes are complicated, as well as you'll use a number of other complementary records such as tax lists, wills, and court records. So you'll want to look for and again, I will show you how some of these other types of records, in particular tax lists, can really help to complement the deed research that you're doing. County and state boundaries changed over time. This is an extremely important concept to be aware of, because your ancestor, depending upon where they live, they may have lived in one area a long period of time, and yet they might have deeds recorded in more than one county, or perhaps even more than one state. A good example, perhaps, would be someplace like what we would today call southwestern Pennsylvania. That at one point was an area disputed between Virginia and Pennsylvania at the time of the American Revolution. It wasn't until about 1782 that the two states finally agreed on the boundary dispute. But until there was a period from about 1775 or so on up to about 1782-83, when a number of those counties were Virginia counties, and you will sometimes find those individuals listed in both Pennsylvania records as well as Virginia records. So again, your individual may have show up in the deeds of Youghiogheny County, Virginia, in the late 1770s, and Washington County, Pennsylvania, in the 1780s, and they never went anywhere. The land, the boundaries are just changing all around us. So be aware of boundary changes. Also, another good example is the boundary changes that occurred between the states of Maryland and Delaware just before the Revolution. And a number of people who grew up as Marylanders, thought of themselves as Marylanders, suddenly found themselves as members or residents of the state of Delaware.
Tennessee and North Carolina.
Yeah. So you'll find that in a number of areas. Deeds more likely to identify family relationship, deeds of gift. These often identify the relationship between the grantor, that is the person giving the land or selling the land, and the grantee, the person either buying the land or receiving the land. Quitclaims. These are often conveyed in connection with an estate settlement. The grantor is relinquishing any claim they may have to a tract of land. They may not actually have the legal title at that particular point in time. And oftentimes, when you see this having to do with an estate settlement, it'll say maybe like 1/7 undivided interest, or 1/5 undivided interest. That just means now that if it says 1/5 undivided interest, there are 5 people who can claim legal title to that land. So you've got one person in that record there. Now you've got to go try to find out who the 4 other people are. Deeds of partition, part of an estate settlement here again. You may find those in the court records. Maintenance deed. These is where elderly parents can grant all their property to a growing child in return for their care. In these particular types of deeds, more likely than not, there will be no estate settlement, there will be no will. Unless a will was conveyed before the time of the maintenance deed, there probably will not be any sort of estate settlement or will because the land has all been deeded away. Less likely, types of deeds less likely to identify family relationships include warranty deeds, probably the most common type of deed that you'll see in indexes. And this is simply a type of deed where the grantor has clear legal title to the land, and they can go to court if needed, and they can stand up in court and say, I have clear legal title, and the individual to whom I just sold the land now has clear legal title. Deeds of trust. Usually a debt is involved. Party A owes money to party B, and so they're putting property into the hands of party C to be held as collateral. And there's usually a date on the deed saying if the debt is not repaid by such and such a date, the individual who now holds the land in collateral has the right to go to the county steps, sell the land, and give the proceeds to the individual to whom the debt is owed. Military bounty land warrants. Oftentimes, the vets who receive the bounty land warrant assign it over to someone else. It's seen in very few instances have I ever seen cases where the bounty land warrant was taken up by the veteran and they actually went to live on the land. Very often it's assigned over to someone else. They can sell it. The fan club principle. The fan club is a term that was coined by Elizabeth Shown Mills, meaning friends, associates, and neighbors. It's a very important principle to keep in mind when you're dealing with land records. Who are the adjoining landowners? Oftentimes these individuals were either close family or extended kin, as you will see in the case study. Who are the witnesses to the deeds? Witnesses may provide you other clues to family members or associates. And what's nice is this begins to put your ancestor as part of a community. They're not just in isolation. And then you begin to see these groupings. And once you begin to see some of these groupings and you begin to realize some of the same names appear over and over again, you can then start looking and you'll pick up on a certain name. And even if it's not your ancestor, you start looking for your ancestor in those deeds because you recognize, aha, this is a family that I know is in very close affiliation or with my family. So it's a very important principle to keep in mind. The fan club members often migrated together. And here again, people aren't just traveling alone in many instances. So we'll start now with the farmer family case study. I've given you a pedigree chart because this will be helpful as a visual guide as we go throughout the study. The lineages that you see here were all demonstrated throughout time and all through deeds. All these connections were proven through deeds. The first of the land records is dated 1744, and the last one is dated 1811. So that gives you a time period, it gives you an idea of the time period that we're dealing with in this study. And you'll see boundary changes from county to county, and you'll I'll be able to demonstrate how we're able to establish various family ties. I have color-coded the different family groupings, and you'll see that as we go through here. Because as you look at this, you'll see, for instance, all the farmers are this particular shade of green. All the hatchers are on this particular shade of blue. And it's just kind of a visual demonstration of the fan club principle as we go throughout the presentation. And we'll go back to this particular pedigree chart at the end as well. So, because we'll talk about this more at the end, depending upon the amount of time. This is not the clearest of maps, unfortunately, but at least it gives a very rough idea. Up here, in the blue, in the upper right-hand corner, we have Henrico County, which was created in 1634. We have Chesterfield County, which was created out of Henrico in 1749. Down here in Southside Virginia, on the North Carolina state line, we have Halifax County, which was created in 1752. And the land in which the farmers own down, for instance, down in Halifax, and I'm just going to point it out, they are up here in the northwest quadrant of the county. And here again, this is like following, you want to follow the land courses, or the water courses in the land records, because that, and I will bring that back up in just at the end, because there is actually another individual that I'm not going to talk about today by the name of Frederick Farmer. He's down on a whole other water course down here, and because of that, because of some other records, we can separate them out as being part of a whole different group of individuals. John and Susanna Farmer, in 1744, August of 1744, John Farmer received from the colony of Virginia a grant of 196 acres in Henrico County. And it was bounded by Robert Elam, John Hatcher, and William Atkins. 4 years later, in November 1748, John and Susanna Farmer deeded the same 196 acres to Frederick Farmer for 1 shilling sterling. Now, the 1 shilling sterling is a very important little note here, because this is just a token consideration. It's just trying to make sure that no one challenges the document. This basically this would have been the colonial equivalent of selling someone something for $1. But it's a very minimal amount. On that exact same day, John and Susanna Farmer also deeded 150 acres and 200 acres to Mark Farmer and Joseph Farmer, respectively, and each again for only 1 shilling. The grantees, that is to say, for the deed to Frederick Farmer, Mark Farmer, and Joseph Farmer witnessed that, and then Joseph and Frederick witnessed the deed to Mark, and Mark and Frederick witnessed the deed to Joseph. So you see, it's very much a family affair. And along with this individual by the name of William Atkins, who has adjoining land, who's an adjoining landowner. And William Atkins is going to be an important member of the family club, and I'll demonstrate that as we go along here further. Now, it's interesting to note here too that at the time that this land is conveyed in 1748, this land is located in Henrico County. So all these deeds are registered in Henrico. Interesting too is in the abstracts for these deeds, which we have here in the library, the deed abstract for the land to Mark Farmer says Mark Farmer, son of John and Susanna, whereas the deed abstract to Joseph and to Frederick does not say son of John and Susanna. So when I saw that deed abstract, I asked myself, does the actual deed say that Mark is their son, and the other deeds do not say that they are not sons? When I actually rented the microfilms and looked at the actual deeds, None of the deeds actually state that Frederick, Mark, or Joseph are the sons of John and Susanna. In 1749, Chesterfield County is created out of Henrico. Then in August of 1754, John Farmer Sr. conveys 200 acres in Chesterfield to James Farmer for 1 shilling sterling. And again, we have witnesses, Joseph Farmer and Frederick Farmer. And I think, even though William Adkins was the witness, I think this may be, in context, I think this particular name may be a variant of the spelling here. I don't know this with 100% certainty, but I'm thinking it may very well be. The actual deed, too, is kind of interesting here in that the deed to James Farmer in 1754, it says that he is getting 200 acres, the south side of a 400-acre tract on a particular watercourse, bounded by Joseph Farmer. Well, that 1748 deed that we were just looking at, where John and Susanna were giving 200 acres to Joseph Farmer, he got the 200 acres of the 400 acres on the north side. So he's now taken the 400-acre tract and he's split it. And Joseph Farmer is getting the north half, James Farmer is getting the south half. Now, the fact that Susanna had conveyed her tract, her part of the land, in 1748, but she's not there in the 1754 deed, would indicate to me that she's likely dead at that point in time. Now, considering the approximate equal acreage deeding and the token price of 1 shilling in each of these 4 deeds, it appears that John and Susanna were conveying these as deeds of gift, even though without stating so. You would normally, in a deed of gift, see something like, to my son, or for love and affection, that type of thing. It doesn't. You don't see any of that type of wording that you would normally expect in a deed of gift, and yet, when you see they're all getting approximately the same acreage, roughly 200 acres, Mark gets short of a little bit there with 150 acres, but they're all paying only 1 shilling sterling. And it looks like you essentially have parents who are trying to be equitable among 4 grown sons. William Hatcher to grandson, Frederick Farmer Jr. in 1755. In May of 1755 in Chesterfield County, William Hatcher the elder, and he's referred to as such in the deed, he conveys to his grandson, Frederick Farmer, the younger son of Frederick Farmer, and Martha Hatcher, my daughter, now deceased, for love and affection, 100 acres in Chesterfield. And there was no consideration involved in this particular deed. And again, here we have, you notice some of the witnesses. They include James Farmer and Joseph Farmer. How tithes lists complement the deeds. Fortunately, we have the 1756 and 1762 tithes lists. Now, tithes lists were a type of tax list. And in 1748, there was some legislation that passed that took effect in June of 1751, stating that white males would be titleable at the age of 16. This particular act of legislation remained in effect until 1779, when the titleable age changed to 21. Therefore, the individuals who appear on the tithes list in 1756 and 1762 would have been at least age 16. And we have William Hatcher Sr., you see Frederick Farmer, Joseph Farmer, James, Mark. It's interestingly enough, there's only one Frederick. Yet we have, just that year before, we have that deed saying that Frederick Farmer the Younger was the son of Frederick Farmer and Martha Hatcher. And here again we have William Hatcher Sr. We have all these farmers who were involved in the 1748 and 1754 deeds, yet there's only one Frederick Farmer. Therefore, the conclusion is, because there was only one Frederick Farmer both in 1756 and 1762, the one who received the land in 1755 must have been a minor at the time. So he was born sometime, even if you went back 16 years, 1762, he's born sometime after that. But because we know his mother is deceased by the May 2nd, 1755, that gives you a kind of a window of time of when he would have been born. Deeds for personal property. Here again we have another deed of gift from William Hatcher, Grandpa, to his grandchildren. And the first one he names Branch Turner. She's now a married daughter, so she has come of age to where she's now married. Frederick Farmer and David Farmer, children of his daughter Martha, now deceased. In this particular deed, he was conveying, rather than conveying land like he did to his grandson in 1755, he's now conveying slaves or personal property. And in this particular case, Frederick received a slave boy by the name of Watt. And that's going to be significant. Here I'll demonstrate it soon. And unlike the 1755 deed of gift from William Hatcher to Frederick Farmer, Martha's husband is not named here. So you wouldn't necessarily know who the father was of these farmer grandchildren if you didn't have the two deeds taken in conjunction with one another. So if you had only the 1767 deed, you'd know that they're farmers, and you'd know that they were the grandchildren of William, but you wouldn't know who their daddy was. Also, another thing that's interesting to point out here is this. You see this first name, Branch, right here? The Branch family was another old Henrico family. The fact that someone has been named Branch could very well mean that there's some sort of family affiliation there. I've never studied Branch Turner or the Hatcher any possible affiliations between the Hatcher family and the Branch family, or the Branch family and the Farmer family. But I suspect that somewhere along the line there may very well have been, because I know for a fact that the Hatchers, the Farmers, and the Branches were all early Henrico families. So now they're moving on from Chesterfield County to Halifax County, Virginia. In August of 1772, John and Sarah Milner of Halifax County now, they conveyed 214 acres in Halifax to a man that they referred to as Frederick Farmer, Sr. of Chesterfield County. Now, here again, the fact that they're referring to him as Sr. indicates that there's got to be more than one individual in that county. And if you had someone who was probably a minor at the time and was not being involved in any sort of legal records, I seriously doubt that they would have put this in here. So more likely than not, Junior has now come of age. He's now come of age, probably. And a month after this particular deed, where Frederick Farmer Sr. buys land in Halifax, Frederick Farmer and his wife Obedience of Chesterfield sell the 196 acres, the same land that he received from John and Susanna Farmer in 1748. The land that was originally in Henrico, it's now in Chesterfield. So again, you're dealing with two different counties. When it first came into the family, it was in Henrico. It's now leaving, he's selling it to Thomas Bridgewater. It's in Chesterfield. Also, this one particular deed, notice here, we have a second wife thing, obedience. Here again, I don't have any other records in my research. I have found no other records which name the wives. So, again, the deeds are what name the wives. Frederick Farmer Jr. In April 1774, Frederick Farmer Jr., this one now of Halifax County, he sells to Thomas Bridgewater, the same grantee to whom the land was sold by the other Frederick Farmer. He sells 100 acres in land in Chesterfield County, and this is the exact same, if you look at the land description, it's the exact same land that he received from his grandfather, William Hatcher, back in 1755. This tells you right here now, too, that definitely as of 1774, he's reached 21 years of age. No one in their right mind would have ever bought land from a minor. Land can be received by a minor. They can be deeded land by a relative. The land would be held basically in trust. But no one would ever consider purchasing that land until that individual has now come of age. Then in July of 1779 in Halifax, an individual by the name of Thomas Finney, who I know from the land records down in Halifax was a considerable landowner from the very early days of the county in the 1750s. And he's deeding land to his granddaughter Mary Boyce for all the help she's given him over years. And he says, "To give and grant to Frederick Farmer Jr. heirs begotten of my granddaughter." Well, this now and in the exact wording of this deed too. This was conveyed in 79, but he mentions something about an agreement done in 1778. Which leads you to believe that perhaps Mary Boyce and Frederick Farmer had gotten married sometime right around 78. So this gives you not only Mary's maiden name and her given name, but it also gives you an approximate marriage date. We don't, because this is before the time period when the Virginia is issuing marriage bonds. So again, here are the deeds. Deeds are explaining all the family relationships. Unfortunately, the one thing I don't have in the deed here is I don't have any sort of idea of the parents of Mary. How tax lists complement the deeds. In the 1784 personal property tax list for Halifax County, Virginia, Frederick Farmer Jr. and Sr. are right next to one another. And Jr. is assessed one slave by the name of Lot. That's the name of the slave that he received from his grandfather, William Hatcher, in 1767. Senior is assessed for 6 slaves, including one named Millie. And in 1802, for love and affection to his son, he conveys Millie to Matthew Farmer for $1. Here again, as a token consideration. In 1800, Frederick Farmer, now of Randolph County, North Carolina, it doesn't say at that particular point in time, it's Randolph. It doesn't say junior, senior. So now you're kind of asking yourself, well, which one are we dealing with here? But he's selling the land on Bradley's Creek, and this is in the northwest quadrant of the county, and it helps to document the movement of Frederick Farmer Jr. down to Randolph County, where his will was probated in 1818, and his will mentions his wife Mary. Now, the last time that Frederick Farmer Jr. appears on the Halifax County deed lists is in 1786. and that's the last time where you see the name Frederick Farmer Jr. in the deeds of Halifax, is in 1786. So apparently about 86, 87, he now heads down to Randolph County, where he finishes out his final years. His father, Frederick Farmer Sr., continues to stay on in Halifax County, Virginia. And in 1811, he's now an old man, Frederick Farmer deeded all of his property to his daughter Betsy and son-in-law Benjamin Dixon Jr. And this is stated as such in the maintenance agreement. And they are to take good care of him, for the rest of his years, give him a place to stay, food, etc. That couple, Elizabeth Farmer and Benjamin Dixon, get married in Halifax County in 1792. There is no estate settlement for Frederick Farmer in Halifax County. There is no will for Frederick Farmer in Halifax County. The land has been, and all the property has been deeded to Betsy and Benjamin Dixon. So then, once again, there's kind of a rehash of all the family associations we've seen here. Again, all these family associations were proven all through deeds. And in fact, I could have even, if I had had more time and more space, I could actually go back further here. John and Susanna actually conveyed land together in Rico in 1734. And in that particular deed, the 1734 deed, it's where they convey 75 acres, and it says land that John received from his father, Henry Farmer. And you go back in time to 1709 to that deed of gift, where Henry Farmer conveys 75 acres to John, which was then sold in 1734 by John and Susanna. So you see how you begin to track the families back in time. Over here, Thomas Finney, the individual I told you, who was a considerable landholder. In the 1750s, he conveys land to a man by the name of Benjamin Dixon, for thanking him for marrying his daughter, Winifred Finney. This is all laid out very clearly in the deeds of Halifax County. Then in the 1770s, he conveys land to his grandson, Stephen Dixon, and he states in the deeds that Stephen is the son of Benjamin Dixon and my daughter, Winifred. Well, as a result, then, you start to see a lot of interaction between Frederick Farmer Jr. And Stephen Dixon. You see their names right next to each other. There's a lot of tax lists or witnessing deeds of one another and so forth. And that's because Mary Boyce is a grandchild of Thomas Finney, and Stephen Dixon is a grandchild of Thomas Finney. But by just looking at the names, Frederick Farmer Jr. and Stephen Dixon, you look at them and say, well, there's no association. Well, actually, yes, there is. This is where the whole fan club principle comes in. Also, another thing that I wanted to point out here is this. The deeds make it very clear that William Hatcher, that all three of these grandchildren here are all the children of Frederick Farmer and Martha Hatcher, his daughter, who we know was deceased prior to May 2nd, 1755. That was the first of two deeds of gift. Now, Frederick Farmer, we know he has a second life obedience prior to 1772. In the January 1772 will of William Atkins of Chesterfield, he names the daughter obedience farmer. He doesn't name her husband in the will, or he doesn't name Frederick Farmer anywhere, at least not in the abstracts. I actually haven't looked at the entire will or the estate record. But we do see the name William Atkins popping up time and again as an adjoining landowner, as a witness to those early deeds. So I certainly would not be surprised if this obedience was in fact obedience, the daughter of William Atkins, named in that will. Also here, I wanted to point out that the 1802 deed of gift points out and proves that Matthew Farmer, who was born about 1761, according to his Revolutionary War pension statement, he was born in Chesterfield County, Virginia, about 1761. Therefore, we know he cannot be the son of Martha Hatcher because she's dead by May of 1755. But he is the son of this Frederick Farmer. He is therefore a half-brother to Frederick. What isn't clear at this particular point is whether or not Obedience is his mother. This is one problem that we encounter oftentimes on the applications and the supplementals that we receive here in the society. We may have a record to prove that so-and-so married so-and-so on such and such a date. So we know they were a spouse, but then you go up one generation. Maybe you have a marriage record in 1790, and then the child was born in 1806, the child that you want to try to prove. But you don't have anything showing the mother or the bride past the 1790 marriage record. Well then, if you don't have anything showing that she's even alive in 1806, how do you know she's mommy? You don't. So here again, that's why I didn't draw the line for Matthew Farmer between Obedience and Frederick, and I just drew it just from Frederick, because we only know from the deeds that only that Frederick was his father. We don't know for certain that Obedience was his mother. We don't know when Obedience and Frederick married. But we do know from the deeds, again, that Frederick Farmer Jr., Branch Farmer, and David Farmer were all children of Frederick and his first wife, Martha Hatcher, and then she was the daughter of William Hatcher. And then also, the deeds also make it very clear the whole migration from Henrico to Chesterfield, and then Frederick Farmer Jr. then goes on to Randolph County, North Carolina. Follow the land. That's something that you'll hear sometimes in our department, where we say, if someone is trying to find further information, you always want to refer them to the land records. Did you follow the land? They look for further deeds, and in many instances they haven't. Sometimes they'll come back with us and they'll find us beautiful records, and I love seeing that because there's just so much information that can be found in these records if people will only start digging around. And I just wanted to kind of mention too here that before I started doing all this family farmer research, or the farmer family research, I had no clue about all these deeds. I knew about Matthew Farmer, and I just started trying to go little by little back in time, from what you know to what worked back to what you don't know. And I was just amazed at how little by little I would find a deed of gift proving this, and then find a land record, or another land record proving that bit of information. You find the tax records complementing the deed records and so forth. And all of a sudden, everything began to come together as an entire picture. So I do think that land records, deeds, are an underutilized resource, and I'd like to maybe hopefully inspire some people to start digging into it, because you can really find a lot of wonderful information in these types of records. And then there's the bibliography. Very quickly. Down here at the bottom, I've kind of put the sources in which you'll find a lot of the deeds cited in today's presentation. We have most of these are actually, we have all the abstracts here in our library. And like the Family History Library, the films, those can be rented. You can go to Family Search, the particular county that you're interested in, rent them. You can have them sent here to the DAR library. You can have them sent to a local family history library, and then look at them there. It's a very convenient way of accessing land records. There's a wonderful book, a favorite of mine, Locating Your Roots, the top one, Discovering Your Ancestors Using Land Records by Patricia Law Hatcher. It's a good find. If you're kind of new to land records, you'd like something that has a good glossary, explains things well, kind of just tell you about what's the difference between state land states, federal land states, etc. This is an excellent source. I am very fond of the BLM, General Land Office records. That's a wonderful land site. A lot of neat things can be done on that website. Cindy's list has a lot of links to both general land resources and specific area land resources. So that Cindy's list is a wonderful site to go to, and just start following wherever, you know. And then on Family Search, you can check individual states for deed availability. I know New York has a bunch of deeds on Family Search. I can't speak for every state, but I know New York has a bunch of them. But then you can also rent the microfilm reels through the Family Research Centers, or you can either do those at the Family History Libraries or just have them sent here to the DAR Library. And so I hope you got something out of today's presentation and perhaps inspired you to look into land records. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. And I'll also be happy to hang around afterwards, after the presentation is over. And if there are any websites that you'd like to take a look at, or anything of that nature, or sources you'd like to just kind of ask me about, I'd be happy to discuss and see if I can help you out in any way.